Hello everyone, and welcome to Whitetail Driven Solutions YouTube channel. We are bringing you tips, strategies, and tactics to help you and your property be more successful. We not only invite you to subscribe to our channel, but also hit the notification button to be notified when we release new videos. Today's topic is what is needed, where, and why. That is a very a broad spectrum when we're talking about trying to take all parcels in general and put them into and cover them with a blanket, as they say. And it's something that I think that in our industry here has become a way for maybe some of the other guys that create habitat improvement in the area. They either one, overlook it. Two, they try to do it from a distant location. And I stress to all my clients that I work with, not only here in Michigan, but in the Midwest and wherever we travel to, I stress that to them very pronouncedly, that very strongly, that you have to be able to treat these parcels in such a different outlook on each property with the same mission and the same professionalism and the same goal, that other properties that these improvements have worked on other properties, but where and when do you tie all this stuff in? I get a lot of phone calls that ask that for me to do that from afar. And that's why I have this, over the years, I've created this this way that we make this process flow. And that's why we do the analysis package. That's why I start with the initial contact and getting those the backerboard aerials that I had spoke about, and then we go out and perform these analysis packages with you guys on the property, and boots on the ground, if you will. You can do a lot from an aerial, but don't get caught in a trap of trying to just design it from the aerial, and when you get there, just having square footage is right, and it looks great from an aerial, but if you don't actually implement that on the aerial when you are on the ground at the same time to tie all this like our analysis package together, what you're going to find is you're going to start putting these parcels together, and it's going to hinder the design. You're going to have to tweak things, and it's not going to fit, and it's a step that you need to take out. What I recommend doing is we do the analysis package with the aerial, and then we design it back to the aerial and tweak it after we know the whys, and like the topic is today, where and why to put that there and when. When you're taking advice from somebody that you've reached out to, or has knowledge, or there's a lot of guys out there with a lot of knowledge of hunting. There's not a lot of guys out there with the power and the know-how and the knowledge of design and hunting for someone else. And that's where I come in. That's why I feel so strongly. That's why this business is so successful, is because as a hunter, but as a guide, and then also as a habitat manager, and then also now with bringing these properties full circle and being with these properties from start to finish. It's a profession that has been polished for a long time. So keep that in mind when you have somebody you're reaching out for help and you need some guidance. Keep in mind, if it starts going down a road that you're getting a feeling that the design, because what's popular or what's trending in the industry, and it's because what your neighbor did, and your neighbor's got this and your neighbor's got that, you need to be able to study what your property needs, and you need to make sure that that property flows with certain things that may be trending. You don't implement the trending thing first and just hope it works. It doesn't work that way. There's not a percentage that I have ever seen on any small parcel or any parcel in general that we've ever been on. I've never been able to say, okay, 10% of your land should be in food plots, and 30% of your property should be covered. Keep that in mind when you're reaching out for advice, like I said, or you're putting these parcels together yourself. You're stopping and taking the time that's needed to design these parcels, and you're putting it on the Onyx Hunt, and you're putting them on these backer boards. And then keep in mind that just because you're an acre short of that 10%, or you're 3 acres short of that 30% of cover that everybody speaks of, don't get discouraged and think your property is going to fail because you're not reaching those numbers. So last year, when we did the parcels here local, I'll use a 30-mile radius. None of those parcels ended up being a idea where I was able to come back and at the finish of those projects say every one of them had the same number of cover, had the same percentage of plots, had the same percentage of bedding areas. It doesn't work that way. And the more that I go forward with this business, the more that I see that is a forced approach that misleads people. And by taking that advice and going down a road where you're listening to that, you're going to set yourself up for failure. And you need to focus more on, like this topic touches, you need to focus on the terrain. Flow on these properties, guys, is a huge key, particularly a situation that needs to be focused on these small parcels, because it's even more important to make these properties flow. And I see a lot of that going into these any of these properties, but going into these I'll call them well diverse, well trained properties. And I go on there, and everywhere that I look, I'm speaking of properties that have been maybe have had some management done on them before, or had some improvements created, or maybe the landowner yourself was just kind of picking away at it over time. It doesn't take very long to notice dead ends, and it doesn't flow. And if you're walking these properties and it doesn't flow, there's one of the things that needs to connect. If you cannot set foot on that property and make it the feel, if you feel tight, it's not a flow. It's not a flowable property. So where does the focus go on, where, when, and how? Well, one of the major oversteps that I look at and I see all the time is a huntable transition area. We always talk about the functionality of these properties don't flow, which doesn't create a huntable transition area. It doesn't create that area where you can be in that funnel, on that bench system that you've created, far enough away from the bedding, far enough away from the feeding or the feed locations and destination locations, and it doesn't flow. So what you get is you force when that does not flow, you force a staging area. A lot of the times when you force a staging area too far away from your transition area, your huntable transition location, your stand location. You force that area too far away, and where is that in an evening hunt? It's too far away, which means it's back towards the bedding area, which causes nocturnal movement. Another thing that I get as I'm thinking here, another topic that I get asked a lot is, especially for whatever reason here in our area here in Michigan, probably more so than any other place around the country, as I get these comments about, my property is only 10 acres or it's only 20 acres, and you say you have to have, make sure you have the distance between point A and point B, and you got to be in the center. And I don't have that capability. I don't have this range of motion, and I can't create it. And you are that question or that comment is way outside the box. I can make deer flow on 5 acres, and it just, like I said, there's no percentage that ties to that'll make that work. Because what you need to keep in mind is you need to keep in mind that the flow and the transition of that property all is determined by the destination feed areas on where them deer are going or where they're coming to. Now, like we've said before, on these small parcels, you can't, hold these deer. It's completely impossible to hold all of these deer on these small parcels for 24-hour period for 365 days a year, which like I've said before 100 times, and I'll say it again, is if you don't encompass that 365 day a year, 24 hours a day, you have a small parcel. And that's something that you need to understand going into this, is that you have to be okay with letting those deer go, but you have to understand where they're going and how you're getting them back. And once you get them back, the key is to keep them there as long as you can, and which deer are there during them fall months. A key ingredient is to be able to put your boots on the ground and make that flow yourself. But if it doesn't flow, then that's where we come in and we make that flow. And once you see them parcels, these small parcels really flow on a small spectrum. If you ever have the ability to advance into a little bit larger property, or if you take this flow and you go out onto a public land hunting situation, let's say, you're going to notice these areas. It's once you see it, it's etched in your mind, and you won't forget those areas and how that feels. So couple of the things that I would say that all of these properties and all these parcels really need are, at some point you're going to need to introduce a warm season grass, a switchgrass. Cave-in rock, for example, is what we use. You're going to need that introduced into your property. And also introduced to that, you're going to need to up the browse. Now, how do they tie together and why? The switchgrass is a huge key on making the property, on the flow of the property, the design, everything meet all your edges, and you create the edge. To me, that switchgrass makes everything warm. It gives everything a warm feeling, instead of having a sharp edge on the edge of a food plot or a sharp edge on a transition area. I use it to warm up the area, to flow the area, to blend. Blend is a good word, I guess, to use into those back into the timber, off the edge of that complete edge. It's an edge, and they'll make it an edge, and they'll continue to use the edge from that, your thick browse area into your little bit more open hardwoods, or that line of travel between your bedding to feed. They will continue to use that. But if it's comfortable, if it's soft, if it's warm, and warm I don't mean by temperature, warm I mean by feel, they will continue to use that. Very, very seldom do I ever get a property that I first step foot on that from bedding to feeding is warm the entire way. Very, very few. And that's one of my goals, is by the time that I'm done with the property, or the time that I'm done designing, or the time that from the design into the creation, and by the time I leave your properties, that area will feel warm. Where does browse tie into that? Browse ties into that warm area, because you have to have not only the browse and that high stem count, which creates the pellet count, which boosts that area and your bedding areas, and makes that area feel comfortable. That browse has to continue from the bedding area in the right design, in the right flow, to tie out into your destination feed locations. And along those areas is where you get these shot plots. You get these. That's a perfect place where we put these water holes. We implement these licking branches and trail cameras, and all this stuff ties into that, because it flows and it feels warm. That's how I recommend answering the question of what do I need, how do I know I need it, where does it fit, is because you have to put your boots on the ground. You have to hire a service such as ourselves that know where it goes, how it should go in there, and how it should fit, and why it's there. And if you tie all these things together, I think that you'll have a more successful experience when you're designing these properties and making them fit. Thanks, guys.